Hello and welcome to another episode of In Focus. On this episode, we have a very special guest with us. Former member of federal and provincial parliaments, has an extensive experience including serving as Canada's first ambassador to Afghanistan and notably as Minister of Citizenship and Immigration in Stephen Harper's cabinet. He is currently running for the leadership race. Joining with me, Chris Alexander. Thank you for being here. We are very delighted to have you on our show.
Thank you for having me. Sat Sri Akal to you and all of your listeners. Thanks for having us in focus.
Pleasure. Mr. Alexander, there are 14 people vying to lead the Conservative Party. What sets you apart from other candidates?
Well, first, some people have said it's frustrating to have so many. I think the opposite. I think it's a sign of strength that people believe in conservative principles, responsible economic management, strong principled foreign policy, and outward-looking. Canada that is a model in so many areas. I think that's why so many of us think we have a contribution to make to this leadership. And how do we set ourselves apart? Well, if you take the 14 and look at who's sat at the cabinet table, who has real experience at the highest levels of government in Canada, it's only about half. If you look at deeper experience, who has seen and understood where the world is going, what challenges we face, from security challenges, Putin, terrorism, to trade and economic challenges, which we have to meet if we want to move forward. That's a smaller group as well. I'd say it's only 4 or 5 of us. And then if you look at who really speaks French and English properly, who could debate the current Prime Minister in both languages, who can speak and connect with the 10 million Canadians who speak French, that's a smaller group as well. And then if you look at who has all of those capacities, international experience, cabinet experience, bilingualism, I think it's just 1 or 2 of us. So that's why I'm there, because I think you need these things. You need this experience and you need this ability in both languages to govern Canada. It's a prerequisite. And I'm confident that when the chips are down and Conservatives are making up their minds, they're going to want someone who has prerequisites filled, all of those capabilities, and also someone who has a vision for Canada, for where we go next. Not just criticizing the Liberals, though there is much to criticize, but a vision for how we build on the strong foundations we had, low taxes, high growth, high employment, the first country to have major trade agreements in North America, Europe, and Asia. How do we capitalize on that and become the model for global economic success in the 21st century? I think that's a vision that only Conservatives can deliver, and I'm determined to make that the focus of my campaign.
Definitely. Talking about your policies, one of the things which has literally grabbed the attention is that you proposed to increase the intake of immigrants up to 400,000 per year, which includes 40,000 refugees as well. How do you intend to do that?
Well, first, it can only be done if our economy is strong. I'm not in favor of high immigration if we have growing unemployment or if we have job churn, as we unfortunately have too much of today. If we're only creating part-time jobs, not full-time jobs. We want immigrants to come and succeed. And we had the highest levels of immigration under our Conservative government for 10 years because of a strong economy, because of this demand in the oil sands, in Western Canada, in British Columbia, but also in Ontario and Quebec. So a prerequisite for higher immigration levels is lower taxes, higher investment, higher exports to drive growth in Canada. But yes, I do think we need these higher levels. I think we should aspire to them, because if not, we're going to be facing the challenge and the predicament that all advanced economies are facing. Too many retired people, an aging population, and too few working people to support the social programs and the entitlements that we know we want to have. And so we augment that with immigration. 400,000 would only be about 1% of our population a year. I would focus it on young people, especially those who've studied in Canadian universities and colleges. They're already a very strong component of immigration. And I would make sure that 70% of our immigrants are economic immigrants going to work, contributing, and helping to make this country bigger, stronger. We're only 36 million people right now. I think we can grow up to 50 million. and play an even larger role in global trade, in the global system. We have the potential to do that while protecting our environment, while managing our growth, while planning for our cities and communities to remain great places to live. I think this is what we've done so far in our history in every generation. Canada is a growth story, and that growth depends on immigration.
Definitely. Mr. Alexander, you say that Conservative Party needs a bold vision for Canada's future. What do you think what that bold vision as per you is?
Well, I think it's even more than what we've talked about so far. I think we need to really talk about a new Canada, a Canada that represents and lives up to the dreams that we all have for this country. We know that in areas like immigration, economic growth, quality of life in our cities, the quality of our wilderness, we are second to none. We have something that other countries don't have. But the world is changing. And we cannot just assume that the model of government, the economic model we had in decades past is going to work for us. There are new forces disrupting the economy, the private sector. And we need to embrace a new approach to government and a new approach to growth that will depend on entirely new sectors. I want to see us be a strong energy superpower, developing our oil and gas resources, achieving self-sufficiency. Why do we still import oil in Eastern Canada when we export so much? Build pipelines. But let's also capitalize on our nuclear sector. Let's also capitalize on clean tech, which is strong in Canada. We have the second largest solar panel producer in the entire world. That's a huge achievement on which we can build. And the same goes for hydro and other energy sectors and energy fields that are only emerging now. We also want to be strong in our existing industries, aerospace, automotive, advanced manufacturing. We have strength. We need to build on that. And build on that by encouraging innovation, encouraging not another government program, as the Liberals do, but private sector investment in taking research and development to market, commercializing it in Canada. We do that with lower taxes. But then finally, we need to build the new economy in Canada. We have a great startup scene. We have increasing numbers of growth stage companies in the technology sector. But we want artificial intelligence, that new industry, to happen in Canada. We want the Internet of Things. We want robotics. We want genomics and biotech, genetic engineering, to represent new clusters of success for Canada. And we only do that by being competitive, by lowering our taxes, by having strategic incentives for research and development to happen here, and then by building these massive bridges of partnership with Asia and Europe that are the future for Canada. We're not building walls. We are about doubling and tripling our exports to Asia and Europe. And I think that's the vision we need to embrace for a new Canada. It's a Canada that is seen as the best place to do business, a country of youthful entrepreneurship, fed both by our Indigenous talent and by immigration, and then a country that is building bridges of trade, partnership, and economic success at a time when others are putting up walls.
Yeah, and is known for its diversity and multiculturalism. We'll definitely continue our chat here, but right after a short break. Welcome back after the break. As a special guest, we have Chris Alexander, who is currently running for the Conservative leadership. Mr. Alexander, we would like to know what's your plan for strong job creation?
Lower taxes, payroll taxes, corporate taxes, no carbon tax at the federal level. We need to take ourselves back to the status we had, which was the best place to invest in the world. Secondly, we need to build the infrastructure that helps to get our exports to market. That is pipelines and port facilities, East Coast, West Coast. But it's also networks of support for our companies, for our exporters, all across Asia, all across Europe, as we build these new trade, as we conclude these new trade agreements and build new trading relationships with all the major emerging partners and global partners in this new economy. And then finally, major incentives for research and development. We have good programs, SHRED, IRAP, we reformed those over our 10 years in government, but they need to be larger in scale. They need to be the best in class globally. We need to imitate what the United States does, what Israel does, what the Nordic country does to attract very, very high levels of investment and research and development spending. We're at half the level we should be in terms of private sector spending on R&D. And I think government tax cuts for the corporate sector should be focused on incentivizing R&D in Canada.
Talking about the homelessness, that's another issue I want to discuss with you. How are you going to deal with homelessness and poverty in Canada?
Well, I think I'm the only candidate in this race that wants to eliminate homelessness and poverty. And it can't just be government programs. It needs to be partnership. I've proposed a sponsorship program for homeless people where Canadians who want to help in cities and elsewhere can literally have a personal connection with someone who's facing these challenges, get some support to put them into housing, and then help them resolve the issues, overcome the obstacles that they still have to be able to stay in that housing. There's a program called Housing First that we scaled up in government that provides housing to the homeless, but that also provides all the additional services, mental health treatment, addiction treatment, employment and skills training when that is a requirement, so that not only does the person have a place to stay, but they have a reason to stay because the issues that put them into the street in the first place are being resolved. That program has a over a 50% success rate. I think if we scale it up, if we fine-tune it, if we build partnerships with community organizations, volunteer organizations, with Canadians who want to help, we can get the homeless off the streets in our country and start to deal more seriously with the mental health and addiction issues that we have. Similarly with poverty, we did a lot through the tax system with a stronger economy to reduce poverty among seniors, among children in Canada, but we need to go further and we need to concentrate the benefits, some of the tax reductions that I would like to see on the lowest income people so that they are out of a cycle of recurring poverty. Only a small group is in poverty year after year after year, and they can get on the ladder of opportunity to have new skills, to have new opportunities, and ultimately to enter the workforce. That's a dream that is within reach, but it also has to involve work with Indigenous communities, a much more focused effort to bring First Nations to the center of Canadian national debate, complete the treaty process, provide basic services, and show the respect that has to be the basis of partnership if we're going to resolve these issues on reserves and for Indigenous communities and cities as well.
As you have mentioned, the addiction issues. Opiate crisis right now is a major concern in the country. What's your stand on it?
Well, it breaks my heart because I've seen it firsthand. I lived in Afghanistan for 6 years, which is the source of so much of the world's natural opium. Now we see all these synthetic opiates that are literally ravaging our cities and killing people. The BC crisis spiked up very quickly. I thought the government was very slow to respond. We need to be there at the front lines. Canadians, citizens responding, government responding to get these drugs out of our communities and to make sure that those who are facing addiction have the support that they need so that we aren't losing hundreds of people as we did in British Columbia. So I think the response is too weak, too late, and it has to go with a much stronger law enforcement approach to the gangs that bring these drugs to our shores, or in some cases that produce them here. I honestly find the current government's approach to narcotics totally incoherent. Yes, we had to change the status quo with regard to marijuana, but not to create chaos and anarchy. No one knows what the rules are. And I don't see a very serious approach to law enforcement from this government anywhere. And guns and gangs gangs that use violence to protect their networks, to sell drugs to young people, are a serious law enforcement issue. In Vancouver, in Toronto, and elsewhere, they need a serious response.
Your campaign policies also include fighting terrorism and its sponsors. Talking about the recent attacks in London, terrorism is now threatening the stability of dozens of countries. How you will deal with it?
I'd say with Russia's aggression in Ukraine, it's the top threat to global peace and security. And let's be clear, it seems that this attacker in the UK was born in the UK. We had 2 attacks inspired by ISIS, but by people born in Canada a couple of years back. So it's not a question of people coming from here to there, refugees or immigrants, to conduct attacks. A lot of this terrorism is homegrown, but inspired by very poisonous ideologies that have their exponents and that certainly travel by the internet. So we need to counter that. We have learned how to counter radicalization in Canada. As you were saying, our diversity is our strength. We are moderates in Canada by nature, and that is a huge, powerful force to counter extremism. But our approach to fighting terrorism globally has not worked. It's not enough to drop bombs and help military forces go after these groups in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, or elsewhere. To pull terrorism up by the roots and really bring forward a better future, not just for those countries, but for dozens of countries in the world that face terrorism, we have to address a larger issue, and that is state sponsorship of terrorism. There are countries, Iran is one, Syria was one, Pakistan, in my view, is another one, whose state agencies massively support, with funding, with training, with all forms of support, terrorist groups that are a menace to all of us. I saw this firsthand in Afghanistan. The Taliban would not exist without systematic support from the Pakistani state. That has to stop. We have sanctioned Russia quite comprehensively for supporting separatist rebels who brought violence to Crimea and parts of eastern Ukraine. Why can we not do that for state agencies that have been backing terrorist groups that we recognize to be a menace, that the United Nations lists as terrorist groups? I think that needs to happen. And it's not about more military effort. It's about joining hands to be politically and diplomatically strong, to end a threat that has gone way too far, and to make life better and safer for millions, hundreds of millions of people around the world.
Mr. Alexander, I'm really enjoying this conversation. We'll continue our chat here, but right after a short break. Welcome back after the break. Talking about the 2017 budget. Liberals once again has presented the budget in deficit, and Conservatives are never in favor of it. What do you think about it?
Well, we've been against this government's approach from the beginning. Even the small deficits that they proposed at first struck us as unwise. You go into deficit according to classical economics and according to Canadian practice over centuries when there's a crisis, when there's a war, when there's a depression, when there is an economic downturn. We did that in the worst financial crisis since the 1930s in 2008, 2009. And that was the right thing to do in those circumstances. Today, our economy is growing. We handed off a budget that was balanced, and yet this government decided to go not into a limited deficit of only $10 billion, but into deficit that is now approaching $30 billion. We are the only leading economy that is doing this, choosing to have a deficit when it's not really necessary, increasing our debt, reducing our fiscal margin of maneuver. And if we hit a shock, if there is a crisis, if there is a downturn, we're not going to have the ability to respond robustly. Moreover, we were seen as a stable economy with stable finances and bright long-term prospects because we avoided deficits when others had them. It's sad to see that legacy reversed. We will have an opportunity to get back on track in 2019. And I think Canadians understand that sooner or later, there is only one taxpayer. And as with our households, so with the country, you have to have a plan to return to balance. We have that plan. We have that proven track record. We're going to be taking that to Canadians in the 2 years to come before the next election.
Mr. Alexander, you have talked about your platforms, and that is fairly clear. How do you see the image of the Conservative Party growing over the next 2 years?
Well, I think the image needs a total renewal. I think we are too often seen as our parents' party or our grandparents' party, and also after the last election, we were maligned and depicted by some as a party that is closed, that is somehow unwelcoming. On the contrary, we are the party that believes in Canada's future. We are the party that has an ambitious vision for where Canada needs to go, and we're the party of immigration and a larger Canada that connects with the whole world on a larger scale. To be honest, through my whole lifetime, I think we've had Trudeau's father, who was really bad for the economy. Those were our first large deficits and our first big wave of accruing debt federally. And we tended to have Liberal governments that focused only on North America. I mean, you see this with Justin Trudeau. He's in Washington or New York every week. What is he doing for us to pursue Canada's global vocation, to be a major presence in Asia? Not just trading and investing, but also contributing to security, helping to resolve conflicts. What is he doing to seize the opportunity of free trade with Europe? Very little. We're the party that wants to do that, while lowering taxes, while bringing the new economy to Canada. We're the country that has always believed we have a singular role to play in the world as an example of openness, confidence, as a strong and free democracy that is punching above its weight, that has unusual levels of an unusually high quality of life, but that is also generous enough to contribute, both by welcoming people here and by doing our part to make the world safer and more prosperous. The current government has a lot of rhetoric on that front, but hasn't lived up to our potential. We are essentially, on national defense, for example, free riders, riding the coattails of the United States. That's unacceptable for the new Canada. And I think Conservatives want us to embrace literally a new vision. We've always done this. We were the party that started the first large-scale immigration to this country 200 years ago, that brought Confederation, that brought us through the world wars, and that now has brought us the free trade agreements with the United States, Europe, and Asia that are our lifeblood. Now we need to be the party that actually embraces those opportunities, that brings the global economy to Canada, and then takes our companies, our global champions, global, in the name of Canada. That's my vision, and I think that's going to be a formula for success for Conservatives in 2019.
Definitely. We look forward to it. Do you want to give any message to our viewers?
Well, I'd just like to say how proud we all are of the communities that you have made strong. Over 10 years, Canada had the strongest growth and the strongest job creation in the G7. We want to continue that record, and we know that that happens when government finances are strong, taxes are low, and we are looking outward as a country to opportunity, bringing the strength of new talent through our immigration system, harnessing the talent of our young people through entrepreneurship and the new companies that they are launching, and then taking that success around the world. That's what Conservatives did successfully. That's why we were seen as second to none as a place to do business. We want to get back to that in 2019. Please join me in renewing the Conservative Party and in building a new Canada. Great to be with you, and thank you very much for this opportunity.
Before you go, I want to let everyone know that party's new leader will be chosen on May 27 in Toronto. Thank you so much for joining us. It was really a pleasure talking to you, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.